Royalty aggregators have a different return profile than what is provided by research and development companies and those that commercialize. Todd explains how the cash flows from a royalty interest work and how the approach avoids some of the risks that development companies face.
I think it's important to note for investors how your profile is a little bit different, maybe from a single product biotech company. Maybe some investors kind of think of them in the same opportunity set. But the nice thing about the royalty approach is that in the early days, a lot of times, there are a lot of costs, right? And your profit may be quite low, but Ligand is getting a royalty on sales, right? So independent of how much it costs to initially commercialize it or launch it, that doesn't affect the pay profile for you guys and the investors in Ligand. Maybe you can accentuate that, because I think it's a pretty important factor that maybe some people may not explicitly realize.
Yeah. There's a lot of advantages to royalty investing. There's some disadvantages as well. You got to be careful about. It's different. That's for sure. One advantage of if you do a deal with a company and at the end of the deal, instead of we give them capital, and in return for that, we have a royalty contract in place rather than equity documents or debt documents. And so, if the product is successful, then we'll be successful. If it's not successful, we won't be. So, but the advantages of it is the first advantage is royalties are non-dilutable. So if there's some twists and turns, and there often are in biotech development because it's complicated.
Very true.
If we have a 5% royalty, our investment percentage ownership doesn't get cut in half. We still have a 5% royalty. Our IRR is affected because the launch is delayed and it'll get online a little bit later. But ultimately, you kind of can hold your portfolio without the highly dilutive effect that you would normally have in equity. In equity on the private side, you have a little more pressure to follow on to keep your companies financially strong. And especially on the private side, that can be a very difficult position to be in a market like this. So I like the royalty investing, but also even once you're commercial, we are paid a royalty as a percentage of net sales. So you're basically getting paid off the top line. So there can be heavy twists and turns in the working capital requirements after you launch as well. And so we're a little bit buffered from that risk. Obviously, our partners, we want them to be financially strong. So we're supportive of them. And in fact, like with Palvella is a good example. That's a great company in phase 3 in an indication for microcystic lymphatic malformations. Ligand first did a project finance with them. And then, like many small private biotech companies, there's some twists and turns there. And we bridged them with $5 million. We kind of restructured, moved the royalty rate up a little bit in return for that. And then we supported them in 2 equity rounds as well. So we will follow on and support our companies in equity rounds. As a public company running a royalty strategy, we don't have mandate restrictions. My mandate restrictions are my investor expectations. So I have to be very communicative with my investors, be very clear about what our strategy is, and make sure that they're supportive of what we're doing. But that's different than a limited partnership agreement in a private company where you raise 10-year lockup capital, and it's written down what your mandate is, and you're restricted from going outside of those bounds. That can be somewhat restrictive and not allow you to pivot if the market changes a little bit. If the market changes a little bit with us, we can communicate with our investors and say, hey, we're turning 5 degrees starboard and tweaking the strategy a little bit. And the investors will usually come along with you if you have a sound strategy. So it's an advantageous to be in. I've kind of been, the reason I came back to work really was I think this is an exciting opportunity to really partner with public shareholders in this strategy rather than do it on the private side.